You know Gray Bar for electrical parts, but there's one more thing you may not be thinking of us for that can help maximize your next project's total value. Our pre-project planning services are designed to help you win the bid, save on labor costs, and keep your installers productive across your entire build. The sooner you call us, the better. Because when we're there from the beginning, we can anticipate your needs and help you solve problems before they become problems. Yep, Gray Bar does that.
Pretty light week as far as baseball news goes. Right? There's not really much going on.
Not
a whole lot.
Too much. No.
What are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
It's definitely like we always predict the middle of January to be, just nice and quiet and not everybody, firing on all cylinders, apparently.
Yeah. Totally.
I went to dinner last night with a friend, was out of pocket for 2 hours, wasn't looking at my phone, very enjoyable time, eating pierogies. And I came out and it seemed like the entire world had happened. Multiple signings. Josh Donaldson signed with the Twins. Alex Cora was fired by the Red Sox. Lots of things happened in the scope of 2 hours. So you can imagine what's happened in a week this week.
It has been quite a 48 hours or so, and we welcome you into this week's episode of the Show Before the Show from MILB.com, the official podcast of Minor League Baseball. He's Sam Dykstra. I am Tyler Maun. Episode number 240. And you can get in touch with the show if you would like. You can give us a rating and a review and a subscription. Shoot us an email, podcast@MILB.com. All of that. And we're going to talk about some fun stuff on the show today. We're going to talk about, obviously, some of the big items news-wise around the game of baseball this afternoon as we record on Wednesday, the 15th of January. And we are really just a month away from the start of spring training for pitchers and catchers. Major League Baseball officially announcing the first day of workouts for teams today, and that means opening day just around the corner. And just announced more than 20 new minor league teams will join the Copa de la Diversión Chase in 2020. The Hispanic Fan Engagement Initiative, fresh off its second full season, celebrates the contributions culturally of Hispanic communities across over 90 minor league cities. Through significant on-field identities, in-stadium accommodations, and entertainment options and community impact, Copa celebrates the Hispanic community whose love for the game of baseball has driven it forward. Visit MILB.com/fans/Copa or follow Minor League Baseball on social media at MILB to find out more about each identity and initiative. Today, National Hat Day, so a very fitting day for us to remind you about Copa, because you can go get your Copa hats and be set to go for 2020, which is the season we are approaching. Insanity. And we're going to kick things off with three strikes, talking about one of the top prospects in baseball who is on the move for the 2020 season and beyond. Left-handed pitcher Matthew Liberatore, traded by the Tampa Bay Rays to the St. Louis Cardinals last Thursday. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday the 15th. He was traded on the 9th. But it's a big deal. A 2018 first-rounder. Liberatore heads to the Rays, along with catcher Edgardo Rodriguez and a competitive balance round B pick, the 66th overall selection this year. Those are all headed, I think I said to the Rays. They are headed to the Cardinals, those three, from the Rays. The Rays will get back outfielders Randy Arozarena, Jose Martinez, and a competitive balance round A pick, the 38th overall. Matthew Liberatore jumps into the St. Louis system as the third-ranked Cardinals prospect. And Sam, your reaction to this one kind of came out of nowhere, especially a first-rounder from a year ago being dealt. But it seems like the Rays very often get terrific returns and things like this. They obviously feel like they're very close to being able to compete for some big things, making a playoff appearance last year. Maybe Matthew Liberatore was a little bit further off than what this window is for the Rays, but your reaction to this deal?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to highlight there in terms of the Rays. And I think we all think of the Rays as a very smart organization, and obviously we've talked about that a whole bunch because we consistently have their farm system, if not at the top of the game, close up there. So dealing away a top pitching prospect like Liberatore makes you, kind of stroke your chin a little bit. Why are they willing to give him up? And I think part of that reasoning is something Tyler just mentioned there, and that, they are trying to make the playoffs consistently and not just get back to wild card spots like they have the last 2 years. They want to win the division, and as we've seen, 2018, the Red Sox win the World Series. Last year, the Yankees were a juggernaut to themselves. the Rays need to find the space in the margins to make considerable gains and not just sit on this talent. So you cash in a chip like Matthew Liberatore to get back two pretty good outfielders in Randy Arozarena and Jose Martinez. How they're going to fit is going to be interesting from the Rays side. They had a good outfielder in the past. In Tommy Pham, they traded him to San Diego. Why they go out and get two other guys and kind of move the deck chairs around a little bit when they could have just kept things status quo is interesting to me. But, getting rid of Liberatore for the Cardinals didn't really have necessarily a top pitching prospect, somebody who you could get really super excited about in that system. Liberatore fits that quite nicely. Not only that, he is kind of left-handed. He is left-handed. Takes over for Zach Thompson as the top southpaw prospect in that system. Thompson was their first-round pick last year, so they've got a little bit of depth from the left-hand side on the mound now. As Tyler mentioned, Liberatore becomes their number 3 prospect. I think you can make an argument that him and his good childhood friend, Nolan Gorman, who should be number 2 and number 3. It's actually pretty close between those two guys. Both were first-round picks in 2018, taken only 3 spots apart from one another. Liberatore was 16th. Gorman was 19th. Gorman has some good power. Liberatore, MLB.com just came out with its left-handed pitching prospect rankings for 2020. He slots in at number 6 there. He gets plus grades for his fastball, curveball. His changeup is above average. His control is pretty good, especially for a 20-year-old guy who's 6'5". He did walk 31 and 78 in the third innings, but it's pretty clear he can build off that going forward. Everything else seems to be in place there for him. So the Cardinal system definitely gets a little bit more exciting. Now, what is the next step? Is this all they were looking to do? Arozarena and Martinez, I know the outfield in St. Louis is a question mark this offseason. What were they going to do there? They deal 2 outfielders away. Okay, do they go out and get back Marcell Ozuna? I remember at the press conferences of the winter meetings, St. Louis manager was saying, I don't think Ozuna's gone yet. Until he officially signs somewhere else, I don't consider him gone. They really like him. Do they go out and do that? Is this another lane for Dylan Carlson to make his way to the major league roster even quicker than we previously imagined? That would be exciting, coming off a year in which we called him as the breakout prospect of all of baseball. Now he's the top Cardinals prospect. They're making a little bit extra room for him. That's exciting. Or do they go out and get Liberatore, get him excited to potentially play with Nolan Gorman for a couple weeks, and then spin him off to another team? John Paul Morosi has been reporting a lot this last week that the Cardinals and Rockies are actively engaged in talks.
Oh, really? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, no. As much as it pains me to report this, I'm not reporting it. I'm just echoing what John Paul Morosi said. For Nolan Arenado, is Liberatore somebody they could spin off? Because, yes, this Cardinal system is deeper now. It does have a little bit more top-tier talent that the Rockies should demand in getting rid of their franchise cornerstone, literally their cornerstone. We'll have to see. That will wait to be revealed. But for the way this deal came about, it was fascinating last week because all we knew for a couple hours there was that Matthew Liberatore had been traded. And that was it. And that's usually we don't find out about the top prospect being the headliner first. Usually it's which major leaguers are being dealt, and then we'll find out about the prospects later. So all sorts of ideas were flying about who the Cardinals could be getting rid of to pick up Liberatore. We later find out it's both Arozarena and Martinez. Martinez is a good fit for Tampa just because trying to find outfield space for him was going to be difficult. His bat is good. This allows him more DH opportunities. Tampa Bay has a lot of guys who kind of fit that first base DH type role. I think of Nate Lowe, and I don't know what they're going to do with him, how he kind of fits in here. If we know anything about the Rays, though, it's that they like depth. They like multiple options. They'll figure it out to get to 162 games. Adding Martinez to that mix will be really interesting. Arozarena, still technically a prospect, so we can talk about him in that sense. He becomes the number 12 prospect in that Tampa Bay system. I think they picked him up so he could be a major leaguer. I'm not too worried about that. But he hit 358 last year for Memphis. He's a above average runner. He had 17 stolen bases, showed a little bit more with the bat. He had an OPS above 1,000. He's got a good arm in the outfield. He can play multiple positions. We'll see how he plugs in there. I think he got a little bit overrated because people got a little too excited by the AAA slash line in a year in which we all know AAA offense was up. And also, he was 24 all of last season, which isn't old for AAA by any means, but is a little bit old for a prospect to get excited about. So we'll see how he kind of plugs in there. He's a good depth option for them to have as well as they try to fill that hole left by Tommy Pham. But in terms of a trade that, I think kind of made sense for both sides, even if neither side really needed to make it, it was a fun January trade last week.
Pretty crazy stuff. Kind of came out of nowhere. And time to, I don't know if we should really say right now, time to be excited about Matthew Liberatore as a Cardinals fan, because who knows what the next step is in that deal. But, all very interesting stuff laid out by Samuel there. That brings us to strike two. You may have heard this week there was some news that came down about the Houston Astros, who have been docked their first and second round draft selections in the next 2 years, in addition to a $5 million fine, the firing of manager A.J. Hinch and general manager Jeff Luhnow. All of this stuff is, of course, a huge deal as it affects the Astros going forward. For our purposes, we're going to discuss this draft pick loss specifically because that most heavily impacts the minor league side of things. You look up and down the Astros postseason roster from last year. Carlos Correa, number 1 overall pick in 2012. Alex Bregman was number 2 a year later. Kyle Tucker was the 5th overall pick in his draft. George Springer was a 1st overall pick back in 2011. The Astros have hit so well on their 1st and 2nd round picks. I mean, they've really hit across the board in their draft selections for the last several years. But this is a relatively big blow to the Astros organization in terms of what it brings in from the amateur side. I think there are probably a lot of people around baseball who feel like it's not a big enough blow given the infractions here. But Sam, your thoughts on the loss of these first 2 selections for the Astros for 2020 and 2021?
Yeah, so let's lay out exactly what it means this year. First round picks sound scary for the Astros. It's not going to be as scary, I think, as basically any other team in the league. They were slated to select at number 30 in the first round, literally the last pick of the first round this year. They lose that pick. Their first pick now is number 72. Not only does that hurt them in terms of, those are 2 picks you don't get to take players at, and it's difficult to find high ceiling players at number 72, but it also takes away from their bonus pool. They don't get credit for number 30 and their second round pick. That gets wiped away as well. So they're dealing with a smaller pool that they're going to have to sign their first 10 picks from. So that's not going to be great as well. And then we don't know what their pick would be in 2021 yet. We won't know that until after the 2020 season. But given the current state of the major league roster, we can pretty well assume that it's probably going to be in the final 10 picks. Looking at the Astros system right now, yes, as Tyler was saying, historically the last couple of years, although that was under the previous GM regime that is now no longer there, and other members of the front office have gone on to take other jobs in Baltimore and other places. So it'll be interesting to see what this new front office, A, what shape that's going to take, but B, how they would approach a draft. But they've drafted well in the past, but we've gotten kind of to the point now where a lot of those guys have graduated. A lot of them have been traded. Daz Cameron, somebody who never made the majors of the Astros, they traded him and Jake Rogers and Franklin Perez. Franklin Perez, not a draft pick, but still member of the farm system. They turned those 3 into Justin Verlander. So even if they weren't cashing chips at the major league level, they were turning prospects into legit major league talent. Now you look at the farm system. They've got Forrest Whitley as their number 1 overall prospect. And then he's their only top 100 guy right now. And I feel fairly strongly that none of the other guys on their list are going to crack the top 100 when it's updated in 2020. So, Forrest Whitley, if all goes well, will probably graduate this year. Obviously, we saw last year that that's not a guarantee by any means. And if it's not, then his stock is going to slip even further. And when you don't have a first-round pick coming in, even if it's at number 30, it's difficult to build up that. So what we didn't see is that the Astros didn't get punished for international money. The Braves have been punished for that in the past. Other teams have been punished for that, for overspending on the international market. Do the Astros, I know the cap system is different now, they probably need to be more active players on that side of things. If they're not going to find a gem in the first or second rounds for the next 2 years, they need to find those high ceiling players internationally where they are allowed to do so. Because once Whitley's gone, this system becomes one of the worst in baseball, I think. There are certainly some interesting pieces here. I really like what Abraham Toro did last year. Corey Lee is an interesting guy that they brought in. Brian Abreu already has major league time. There are some pieces here. Christian Javier had a great season last year. But we're not talking about multiple top 100 guys here, and that well is going to dry up pretty quickly. So even if it felt like a slap on the wrist from the draft side, know that this is going to have effects longer than just 2020, 2021. We're going to be talking about the ramifications of this potentially in 2023 and 2024 when we're looking at the Astro system and wondering why aren't there many top-tier prospects here. It's because they weren't able to draft them 2 years prior.
And it just feels like there is so much more to come from all of this story. Obviously, the Red Sox are still sort of waiting with bated breath for what happens there. Alex Cora has been dismissed. Yes, we'll hear mutually part ways. Apparently, that's a new way of saying it for everything. But presumably, that was much more mutual on one end than it was on the other, if you will. But yeah, there's a lot, it seems like, still to come from this story. And we'll, of course, keep you updated on how it affects the minor league side of things as we go forward. Prospect projections continue. Strike 3 this week. National League East is up. The reigning World Series champions among that division. Sam, who stands out to you among the prospect projections on the NL East side for 2020?
Yeah, I'll try not to be as winded as I think I was last week when I was looking back at that and trying to cover the whole AL East. But the one thing that I think is most intriguing to me about the NL East is, the Washington Nationals, World Series champions. Their Twitter account says that every hour on the hour almost. They want you to remember that they are the World Series champions, and hey, they get to do that until another one is crowned. That's great for them. But what's next? The thing about the Nats that was great about this year is that everything came together at the right time, but also it was right before they potentially could lose guys to free agency. Steven Strasburg was eligible to opt out of a deal. They eventually bring him back. Anthony Rendon was actually a free agent at the end of the year. Now he's signed with the Los Angeles Angels. So they have this big opening at third base with arguably their best player. And I include Scherzer and Strasburg in that conversation and Juan Soto in that conversation. Anthony Rendon was so consistent for the Nats the last couple of years and consistently great, especially towards the end. After he was a pretty good rookie, the way he has aged has been incredibly good. That's a massive hole that they have now at third base. It also just so happens that their top prospect is an infielder in Carter Kieboom. Kieboom is mostly a shortstop. He played a decent amount of second base last year, but he also got 10 games of experience at third base. If you remember Kieboom last year, we talked about it a little bit. He was called up for a short spell when Trey Turner was injured, had a ridiculously tough time in the majors. Short sample, all that. Offensively, defensively seemed to struggle. They ended up not bringing him back at any point, even when rosters expanded. He was working out in Florida, staying fresh in case they needed him, but they wanted him to get regular at-bats if he was going to be up. That was not happening when they were trying to chase down a playoff spot themselves. So if all you do is follow the majors, and if you're listening to the show, that's obviously not the case, but if all you do is see Kieboom during his brief time with DC, you would think his ceiling is kind of lowered the last 12 months. Couldn't be further from the truth. He was a PCL end-of-season all-star last year, made the Futures game. Everything we felt about Kieboom at the start of the year, we still feel that way. He has the opportunity to be above average, both with power and his hit tool. He's got a pretty strong arm for the infield. So that makes me think that he could be the perfect filler at third base not just filler, but future of third base for the Washington Nationals. Now, when I did this projections piece, at the same time, the Nats have made some interesting moves this offseason. They brought back Howie Kendrick. They brought back Asdrubal Cabrera. They signed Starlin Castro to a free agent deal as well. Castro's probably going to play second base. Kendrick played a little bit of third last year. Cabrera played a little bit of third when he was with the Rangers. So they have multiple options now. How does Kieboom line up against those guys? Fairly well. Not great, but fairly well. When we're looking at WRC plus, which means average is 100. Anything above that is above average. Anything below that is below average. Kendrick is the only one above average amongst those third base options at 117. He's more likely to be maybe a first base platoon with another guy they signed in Eric Thames. Is it Eric Thames or Thames? I always get it wrong. Thames.
Right.
Thames.
The river is Thames.
The river is
Eric
Thames.
is Thames.
Apologies to Eric Thames. Cabrera is a little bit below average at 98. Castro's at 95. Again, we expect him to play second base. And then Kieboom is at 93. So really debate comes between Asdrubal Cabrera and Carter Kieboom. Now, it's possible that Cabrera gets the position on opening day because he's a more veteran player. He's in his 30s. He's been there before. He was on the postseason roster last year. But the bet almost becomes between a 34-year-old who is obviously declining or a 22-year-old who is obviously growing and needs experience because he's proven everything he can at AAA. I'm always going to take the bet, even if the projections say Kieboom will be a slightly worse player. It's much easier to see him improving on those projections than it is for Asdrubal Cabrera. So this spring is going to be a big one for him. The Nats, in discussing his position this offseason, have said, we think he's a pretty strong defensive shortstop. That's great. Unless they start working Trey Turner out elsewhere, I don't see them moving him off short. So that means Kieboom's going to have to play a little bit more. Hopefully he gets as many chances to prove himself at third base as he can get. The arm will play there. I think his footwork is fine there. It's just going to be a big spring for him. So if the Nats are just looking at, what do we have? And if they're not making any other moves, like we said, Josh Donaldson signed elsewhere. Doubt they're going to trade for a Chris Bryant or a Nolan Arenado. Kieboom is a pretty good bet to at least see third base time at some point, and I think the projections are good enough that he should be very firmly in that conversation for opening day and not just say, go back to Fresno and we'll call you in a couple weeks. With a strong spring, I think he could push back Asdrubal Cabrera, make Cabrera more of a utility infielder alongside Kendrick and Thames and all that, and see how it works out. So keep an eye on that situation coming up in the spring when it comes to third base with the defending World Series champs.
And that is 3 strikes on this week's episode of The Show Before the Show. We're going to have a run through some of the best content on MILB.com today on this week's episode of The Show Before the Show. Josh Jackson's coming up in a little bit to talk about a crazy long-form story that he's got up on the site. And Kelsie Heneghan joins us right now. It is Wednesday, January 15th. This podcast will come out on Thursday, or as known to most people, National Hat Day +1. Today is National Hat Day when we were recording this, and Kelsey's got a story up on the site about 10 of the most popular caps in minor league baseball in 2019. These are not necessarily the 10 most popular, but 10 of the best-selling caps in 2019. They are awesome and colorful and super cool. And Kelsie, run us through some of the highlights from this story.
Yeah, so like you said, it's National Hat Day, so we looked at 10 of the most exciting and most popular hats from last season. And it's a lot of new, bright colors. That's definitely the trend now. They were going from, retro hats and throwbacks to now it's like all about the bright colors and the craziness. And nothing showcases that like Copa. And there's 2 Copa ones with Columbus as a Valeros and Hickory as the Llamas to celebrate the culture of Peru because they don't get enough love in the baseball community, according to Brandios. So that's a fun one. And then let's see, the Udder Tuggers of Wisconsin. That was another huge one. One of the top selling on our website. And I don't know, I guess people just really like cows. I talked to Jason Klein, who's one of the co-founders of Brandios, the guy who designed the company that designs a lot of these hats. And he said that they've been long wanting to do a hat to celebrate cows and the dairy land of Wisconsin. So they decided to go with this one. And it was interesting because he said that, obviously Brandios is known for doing all these crazy rebrands of teams changing their name and their logos. And they decided to take that same formula that's working so well for a whole team rebrand and taking it to just a promo night or something that a team might only wear once or twice a year, but it's still going to be a big deal for the fans.
The Wisconsin udder tuckers, if you're ever wondering, can I get a piece of merchandise with a cow's udders prominently displayed on it? Now you can. You can get a lot of them. You can get the hat, which is one of the top 10 best-selling hats. Obviously, the Copa collection has blown up in recent years in what the sales have been like for that. And we've seen, not just merchandise sales, but ticket sales on Copa de la Diversión nights have been a big jump from the average minor league game. So it's kind of cool to see those represented in this as well. It feels like this is just kind of the start of that wave. I mean, these are 10 of the most popular hats. You got a list of even more than that. How heavy of the influence was Copa on all these?
It's definitely there. I think that they're growing more and more popularity. The latest round of Copa logos and hats came out in, I believe, November. So I'm sure those will keep growing as the season goes on. And it's been cool to see all the new teams jump into Copa in its second iteration, and now it's going to be its third iteration in 2020.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out, you highlighted it before, but just to reiterate it, the llamas being successful, one of the big reasons for that is, it's Peruvian. And we don't think Peru and Hickory, North Carolina match up necessarily. But if we're talking about hats internationally, nationwide, when I think, is it Jesus Luzardo? Tyler, can you back me up on this? Jesus Luzardo has
born
Peruvian,
in Peru.
Yeah, and competed for the world at the Futures game wearing a Peruvian flag. Like there is some connection to baseball there that we haven't seen celebrated in this way. And to see those unique aspects brought out in these hats is a great way to sell them and, bring other people into the game and make people Crawdads fans who probably weren't Crawdads fans before.
Yeah, and that's definitely the cool part about like all these hats, not just the Copa ones, is that you bring in new fans that wouldn't necessarily like think of rooting for a team in a small town that they're not a part of. But one of the ones that does the best of this, I think, is the Lehigh Valley has a John cap, which is Philly slang for a thing. Like, can you hand me that John? Like, I want a piece of that John, like for a sandwich or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you can do that.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking cake, to be honest. But so I just think it looks so cool because it does just look like the Phillies font. It has the Navy star. And if you didn't know any better, you just assumed that the Phillies made it. But it was actually Lehigh Valley adopting the Philly fan base and who's their parent club, of course. And they're, Lehigh Valley isn't too far from Philadelphia. So I think it's pretty cool that these minor league teams can not only adopt like a Latin culture or things like that, but then they also can connect to their parent club, which a lot of teams are fans of the affiliate because it's their favorite team.
And one thing I also wanted to touch on real quick that I don't think we've talked about yet is two teams here did not play technically in 2020. The Rocket City Trash Pandas are on this list. They won't even exist until this season, but they announced their identity last year before the season started, so they got to get a little bit momentum before they start in 2020. But also on here are the Norwich Sea Unicorns, somebody we've talked about with Ben. Again, the Connecticut Tigers existed last year. There is a fan base there, but so many people bought hats for this identity, which was released in the fall, to appear on the end of year list. Kind of talk about that and what you realized about what made Norwich and Rocket City so popular at this stage.
Yeah, Rocket City was actually on our list last year, too. So that's 2 years in a row that they're one of the most popular hats, and they've yet to play a ball game, which is crazy. But I think that it's just wild, and I think that's the kind of hats that sell. It is a raccoon in a trash can-shaped rocket. Like, what? I don't know. It's weird, but it's cool, and so you want to do that. And then the Norwich one, yeah, they didn't announce their logo until December 5th. So that's, 3 weeks that people went crazy for this Norwich hat. And while some people dispute the idea of sea unicorns versus a Norwal. People love it, and I personally that's one of my favorite hats right now. And logos is the sea unicorns, just because the colors just go so well together. And he's snarling, but he has this rose tattoo to represent the city of Norwich, being the Rose City, or the Rose of New England, if you will. But yeah, both Rocket City and Norwich have these names that are not necessarily the common animal name. It's not a narwhal, it's not a raccoon, it's a trash panda and a sea unicorn. But I guess that's what draws people out.
The Rocky Mountain Fighting Guy Fieri's on that list as well. One of the things that I find most interesting about this list of the 10, the Wilmington Blue Rocks, the list includes either alternate identities or Copa identities or new teams, that type of stuff. Wilmington has had this same look and this same logo since 2010. Rocky Bluewinkle is the name of the moose who is on the front of that hat. He is actually wearing a hat with a logo that the Blue Rocks also wear on different hats. But this is such an outlier in this, that Wilmington's had this identity that has aged so well and continues to sell really well.
Yeah, they had the logo, or just the idea of the moose and the BR for they've been the Blue Rocks since 93. But yeah, 2010 was when they decided to change colors, and they kind of just looked around and realized that Carolina light blue was not really that common in sports. So they thought, how can we stand out? And also thinking about the local Little League team, they tend to wear Major League or minor league hats and jerseys. So they thought, how do we make the local Little League team stand out too? So they went with the Carolina blue, and it's definitely stood out. Another one that's in a similar boat is Eugene, and that's actually their road cap, which seems even more or less common. Just, you wouldn't necessarily, I never think to buy a road cap versus a home cap. And Eugene has also had that logo for a while, but it wasn't until 2016 or 2017 that they decided to add the white trim, and that was when it became really popular. The original thought process was to not have the trim and to kind of have the Sasquatch kind of blend in with the background. So you're like, is he there? Is he not there? Just like Bigfoot. But then after a while that's a cool idea, they realized that it might look better if there's the white trim and it can pop, and it clearly has, as the results are there.
And I think one thing, at least with the Blue Rocks, just to go back to what you were saying with that kind of Carolina blue, and we'll talk with Ben about this either earlier in the show, you may have already heard it, or we'll talk about it with him later, but Winston-Salem kind of pops because they're purple. There aren't many purple teams. There aren't many light blue teams either. And I kind of wish in this whole discussion of rebrands and logos and everything that goes forward, we talk about trying to stand out in terms of names. Try to stand out in terms of looks, too. And we see the success here based on that. It's not just, is your raccoon in a rocket that's being fired off from the garbage. It's if you can find just a color palette that doesn't exist somewhere else and really pops on the field, that's going to be successful as well.
Yeah, that's I think it was Fresno last year when they changed their uniforms and their color schemes and everything because they're becoming a Nationals affiliate. They decided to wear red pants, and that was at the time the only team to wear red pants regularly. So It's definitely a lot of ways you could stand out besides just the name. So and I think Copa does a good job of that in terms of colors too.
Maybe we'll have to do National Pants Day. Is that a thing?
I don't know.
There's a national day for everything now. There's got to be a National Pants Day.
Yeah, at the very least, National Denim Day.
Kelsie's story is up on the site right now at MILB.com. One of the best features of this story, all of the hats, all the graphics are linked to the pages where you can buy said hat. So if you are really jonesing for a John hat, in case you want to wear your Philly slang around, you can get it from right there. So check out the story on the site. And Kelsie Heneghan, everybody. Kelsie, thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.
I really wish that I could just use the things that Josh Jackson and I were just talking about before we started recording. We shift gears to discuss some long-form Big J journalism with our big pal, Big J Josh Jackson. This is the worst introduction in the history of this podcast. Hi, Josh.
Hi. It's definitely the worst one I've ever gotten, and I've only been on a few times, so...
I'll
take it. Let's run with
Josh. Josh joins the show for us to discuss at length season 6 of the BBC sitcom Peep Show. No, but I am in season 6 now, thanks to Josh, and it brings me much joy in my life. No, we are going to dive into a two-part story that rolled out to the site last week. Of course, we came back last week with our first episode since the turn of the calendar, and we wanted to let people get back into work and do all that stuff before we dove into Josh's story. If you missed this story, it came out on January 3rd was part 1, and January 6th was part 2. If you missed these stories, this upcoming interview is going to make you go back and read them. If you would like to read them beforehand, we encourage you to do it now. There are two parts of this story about the 1919 Vernon Tigers of the Pacific Coast League, and Josh and I are going to dive into this. If you would like to read it beforehand, probably a good idea. You can hit the old pause button here on the show and then come back and join us as Josh discusses it in a little bit more detail. But if not, guaranteed, this interview will make you want to read it. And with that, Josh, go. No, I'm kidding.
Well, before
no, go ahead.
Let me say before people don't hit pause yet. If you're about to hit pause, hold on one second.
I already told him to hit pause. I'm sorry.
Just,
don't do it yet.
Just as a tip, an easy way to find this story without Googling. If you don't like to type things into search engines, you can go to www.milb.com/history.
Yeah.
And you'll find this story there. I just wanted to take the opportunity to point people to that page because it's a great page that a lot of great stories are on, and a lot of hard work has gone into by a big cast of characters at milb.com. So you can find the Tiger story there. It's milb.com/history.
Do it. That is it's a good rabbit hole to fall into, milb.com/history. And with that, let's kick off this conversation. The 1919 Vernon Tigers of the Pacific Coast League. This, as the I guess shortest summation of this story, would say that it's very much a corollary and a contemporary story to the Black Sox scandal of the 1919 World Series. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot, and you actually kind of say that in the intro to this story.
It's like a mirror image.
Yeah, which is fascinating because I had never heard of this before. But the Vernon Tigers of the 1919 Pacific Coast League, really, really interesting story, crazy characters, all that kind of stuff. Fatty Arbuckle is involved in this story. Like, this is a fascinating. This is the type of thing that, like, oh yeah, Josh wrote this, and now a few years from now, it's a book. Like, just give us the basics of this, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, so the basics are that, yes, Roscoe Arbuckle, I understand, by the way, he didn't like to be called Fatty.
Well, I would imagine.
But, Fatty was like his character, the way that Charlie Chaplin's, his character was the Tramp. So
right.
People didn't go like, hey, the Tramp.
There's the Tramp.
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
But Roscoe Arbuckle would be walking down the street and people would go, hey, Fatty.
I'm sure that was just very heartwarming for him.
Yeah, I've read, I don't know how much, I read some accounts of him saying to people like, I have a name, But anyway, he did indeed buy this team, the Vernon Tigers, which was an early PCL franchise in the city of Vernon, which is now a really industrial little. It's its own city, but it's I think it's like 12 miles. Sort of southeast of Los Angeles. So it's very much part of the Los Angeles metropolitan area, and it's hugely industrial now. At the time, it was sort of something of like a boxing mecca. There was a character called Jack Doyle who was a boxing promoter, had an arena there. He owned a bar that was 100 feet long and had 37 bartenders at 37 registers. And part of the draw for starting the Tigers there was that it was one of two cities in LA County where that was not dry, where you could buy booze. So,
and this is pre-prohibition, by the way.
AKA Roscoe Arbuckle, right? It's pre-prohibition, but still, headed toward prohibition. So there was a family of brewers called the Meyer family who bought into the Pacific Coast League and started this franchise. I think in 1909. I should really have that information in front of me, or no? Yeah, it is 1909. They started, and for the 1919 season, the film industry was on the rise, and Roscoe Arbuckle was becoming a big star. and he loved baseball. He had played baseball as a youth, bought the team. Little did he had no way of knowing, of course, that in a sort of scandal that wouldn't come out until the next year in a grand jury investigation, that year's team ended up buying the Pacific Coast League title, specifically one player, really, Babe Borton. He paid off players on other teams to lie down. And this all came out the next year when Arbuckle, by the way, had sort of had enough of baseball. There's a lot of evidence to support the idea that he was really excited about his purchase of the team in the beginning. This is in the story. You can read about a really fun sort of skit that he and Buster Keaton did before Vernon Tigers game, and what a hoot that would have been to be at. But by the end of the season, it seems like he was pretty much just like, what is this baseball nonsense? I don't want anything to do with this. I've got a film career going. But yeah, so I don't think he had his suspicions or anything, but he sort of avoided a scandal. Of course, he'd run into his own scandal a little later. That's a podcast for another time. I have some things that I did not put in the story that I'll share
Please.
For podcast listeners, so that you guys can get a little bit extra, and then maybe this will entice you to go and look up a story. So one of the things is that the player who came forward in the 1920 season and said there's something rotten going on with that Tigers team, Babe Borton tried to bribe me, was a pitcher named Ralph Stroud, or Sailor Stroud. It was his nickname.
So he gets to go by Sailor, but Roscoe Arbuckle doesn't enjoy Fatty. Okay,
that's right. That's right. So Sailor Stroud was a pitcher for the Salt Lake team, and Borton tried to bribe him to lose the game. Stroud ended up losing that game, but not on. It was like 2-1 or 1-0. He pitched a heck of a game. But so this is what's not in the story. After the game, Borton comes up to him and tries to pay him the $300 that he said he'd give him if he lost. And Stroud said, that he said, no, I pitched my heart out. I didn't want to lose that game. This wasn't for you so and so. And then Borton stuck the money in this guy's pocket. He took the money out of his pocket and forced Borton to take it back into his hands. I just like that level of it becomes like a physical altercation almost.
Yeah.
In that story. And then sort of here's a quote from the Deputy District Attorney of Los Angeles. I think Frank Stafford. Frank might not be his. Hold on. I'm sorry about this.
Fatty Stafford.
Fatty Stafford. It is Frank Stafford. Okay. Have a little more confidence, Jackson, huh? So Frank Stafford, this quote, I think, sort of points to the attitude that we're all sort of familiar with from Kennesaw Mountain Landis in the Big League case. He says, we're going right after gambling at Washington Park. The investigation has been conducted with good results, and the net is tightening around those who may be found guilty. So, there's this attitude that gambling was this sort of pervasive thing, like snaking its way through baseball, and that there are these law and order men who are going to come and clean up this dirty little mess. I think that sort of speaks to the time. Does that make sense to you, Tyler?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and what I think is so fascinating about this story is how contemporary it can be viewed now with coming legalization of sports gambling across the country and all that type of stuff. Like, it's a story that I think a lot of people look at and think, oh, it was 100 years ago, and it's the ragtime era and the Black Sox scandal, and that's so crazy. But there's a lot of stuff that you look at and go, all right, I guess I can see some parallels.
Yeah, I don't think that the culture is quite the same.
Right.
I don't think there's a huge risk of sort of us living through another Black Sox era in minor league or major league baseball. But I think you can sort of understand that this was a real thing that really happened in that framework and understand how that might have happened. Borton, he had this cover story that it wasn't, he didn't, if you read the story, you'll learn all of this, but he didn't, he never said like, oh, I did it because of this gambler that I'm involved with, who's been, phoning up all this cash and reaping huge rewards. His first story was that the Tigers had a pool of money that they'd pooled their money, some of which was like reward money raised by LA fans. This money was to go to the Angels or the Tigers, whoever won the PCL. And that from this pool of money, the team collectively was buying one just because they really wanted to win, which is like a really kind of a weird story.
Yeah.
A weird cover story, almost so weird that for a minute you're like, wow, that's interesting. And like he's naming the names of teammates here. You got to say like, well, there might be some truth to that. And we really, to this day, we can't say that nobody else was involved from the Vernon Tigers, but we can say that the evidence certainly supports this narrative that Babe Borton, working for a gambler, created this giant mess.
Well, and what's so interesting about this story, among many things that are interesting about this story, there is this kind of phenom team that turns into a touchstone for this era for Vernon, but also captures so much of the time of what's going on in Los Angeles and in Hollywood at that time, and Arbuckle's there, and there's this great promotional fanfare. They described that there is basically like a daily riot in the right field stands among the fans who go to the games there.
Really raucous atmosphere. And it's true too that this was a very good team. Like they won the title in 1920 also.
One of my favorite things about that too is the PCL back in the day played like 1 billion games. Like Josh's like, oh, and with that win they improved to like 120 and 77 on the year. It's like, how long was this season?
And they played a lot of doubleheaders.
A lot of doubleheaders. They also, the playoffs, the championship series was all long. Major League Baseball for a long time played a best of 9 for the World Series, if I remember correctly. But there's all this stuff, and that's all in part 1. And then in part 2, it's such a classically American fallen hero tale in that you see the dismantling of this, and you see the way that players kind of turn on each other, and Borton becomes this villain where he was such a hero in that championship season with how well he had played, but it's just it's a classic rise and fall kind of story, and it's fascinating in that way. And there are so many parallels to that Black Sox scandal, but it's just such a different world. And also, 2 points. One, to be clear, the Pacific Coast League was basically a third major league at that point. So we talk about the Pacific Coast League in 2020 as obviously a AAA league and one of the 2 at the highest level of the minor leagues. The PCL back then, when Major League Baseball was all basically an East Coast or an Eastern time zone entity, the PCL was pretty much a major league at that stage. So this kind of has the same, maybe not the same ultimate fallout as the Black Sox scandal, but the stakes were very similar.
It's true. And if people now talk about an East Coast media bias. And if you think that's true now, then go back 100 years ago, just to the extent that, today we very much are aware of the 1919 World Series. It's a part of the public life in The Great Gatsby. It's kind of beyond baseball. But, given that the PCL did indeed actually become a minor league in every sense. It can be hard to remember that, at the time, there were guys who had a choice between, do I go east and play for, Boston or New York or Pittsburgh or Chicago, or do I stay on the West Coast and travel basically up and down California and to Seattle and Oregon, and Salt Lake in there too. The money was not, for some people, the contracts were comparable. If you were a huge star in the big leagues, obviously you could do a little better, but it was, and for fans, it was a big deal because there was, we're talking now, there was no real radio broadcasts of a regular season game in those days. So if you wanted an account of a baseball game, you looked at the box score in a newspaper, or you talked to someone you knew who went down to Washington Park last night and saw the Angels and the Tigers play, and then you went out there yourself, for 3 games over the weekend. And that was pro baseball to you.
Yeah. The other thing, by the way, if you are anyone like me or Josh or anyone who kind of shares the same...
Well, that covers both of us.
who shares the same weird sense of humor and also like strange fascination with like that era and doing like old-timey voices and reading off hilarious slang. Just like the quotes from the newspapers at that time are more than enough to get you to read the story. Like doff the sky piece, which means tip the hat. Right. They refer to fans as bugs. My absolute favorite thing in this entire piece is a reference to Babe Borton had an injury in late August of that year, in which the Los Angeles Herald's Matt Gallagher said that the injury was fixed by a time when, quote, his vertebrae has been shoved back into place, which is the most like 1919 medical understanding that I could ever possibly have gone to. Oh, he just shoved his vertebrae back into place, got that old first sacker back on the field, see?
Yeah, there were other newspaper clippings from various papers that talked about like, oh, the spineless first sacker. He didn't lose his spine.
They removed his
one
spine,
more quote that I kind of pulled aside that is in the story, but I really liked. There's an outfielder who had been accused of being on the receiving end of these bribes of being paid off by Borton. A newspaper found him doing his off-season job just after he had just after he'd been indicted, and he was working for a coal company. He was a delivery man for a coal company, and so a newspaper man tracked him down and said, Margate, you've been indicted in Los Angeles for criminal conspiracy to fix baseball games. What do you say? And he said, I have to deliver 5 more loads today, and I start on a duck hunting trip tonight. He's going duck hunting. He doesn't want to be bothered with your grand jury's indictment.
He literally leads that quote by saying, quote, I saw in the papers today that I had been indicted, whatever that means.
Right.
Whatever that means, it's a pretty substantial legal procedure, man.
Look, man, I'm delivering my coal. I'm doing my duck hunting.
5 more loads.
Whatever you want to do with the prison and the blackballing me from baseball, that's fine. I'm living moment to moment, and at this moment, I'm delivering coal and going duck hunting.
What is incredible, and I'm going to caution anybody who has not read it yet, if you are going to read this story, I'm going to spoil the ending for you. So right now, pause, go read the story.
Also, you had 100 years to learn about this.
You had 100 years to read this. This happened all the way back in 19 Dickety.
Right, that's true.
The end of this story is fascinating in that basically they get to a point where the LA Superior Court judge, Frank Willis, dismisses the indictments and says that throwing baseball games is not a criminal act and there's really nothing to be done legally.
Yeah. And that, can you imagine? So that was, I believe that was on Christmas Eve.
Yes.
Now, this story that, or these rumors sort of broke in August. So if this is your favorite, baseball team, you're following this scandal. If any of these teams, any Pacific Coast, if you're a Pacific Coast League baseball fan, and basically if you're a baseball fan west of St. Louis, you're following the story from August and then there's this long grand jury investigation, and then indictments and warrants for arrests are issued, and then like 3 days after that, I think maybe 2 days after that, a judge just says, well, there's nothing we can do about this. This is a bunch of hooey.
How does it get to the point where they convene a grand jury, hand out indictments and warrants for arrest, and then someone steps in and goes, oh, by the way, none of this is illegal?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is also that sort of attitude of, clean up baseball, where the law being so pervasive that nobody there was no sort of spirit of wait a minute, is this actually a legal matter?
Yeah.
The president of the
there was
PCL
such
at the time was really keen. Right. He was really keen to get a grand jury involved. William Wrigley, he owned the Chicago National League team at the time. The Los Angeles Times, this is not in the story either, but the LA Times found him on Catalina Island, and they're asking him about the scandal in the PCL. And he says, the crooks and gamblers in baseball must go. Baseball is the greatest game of American sports, and it must not be made less attractive to the public by the dishonest players in its ranks. There is but one way to punish the gambling ball player. My computer just did a weird thing. So I'll tell you what that one way is right now, and that is to rid the game of him. It is the only safe rule to follow if the game is to be made clean. And I think this spirit of this is becoming our national game. Its popularity is sort of rising through the roof, and it's every American's patriotic duty, by gum, to see that these crooks are thrown in jail or worse. I think that spirit sort of does explain that. That nobody sort of cooled down and said, wait, this is not a criminal matter, until a judge had it before him and sort of looked at the facts of the case and said, okay, what law here am I to punish these men for breaking?
Yeah. And, as the saying goes from back then, if you're a baseball fan who wants to clean up the sport, you shove your vertebrae back into place and you get out there and do it. You make it happen.
You baseball bugs? Get rid of
the
your
spineless first sacker. This is really just an excuse to get Josh on here so we could do old-timey voices for 20 minutes.
You'll want to check out our other podcast about Peep Show and old-timey voices.
But you really should go read these two stories. There are two pieces, two parts. The first one is titled In 1919, in PCL of 1919, Tigers were wild and dangerous. The second one, part 2, in which the story starts to unravel for the Vernon Tigers. The headline on that one, Truth About Tigers Emerges in Pennant Race. You'll see those both at MILB.com/history, but you really should go read them. They are fantastic stories. Josh Jackson is on Twitter at JoshJacksonMILB. As I said, when this story came out, Josh is out there playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. It's fantastic work. He works harder than any human being I've ever met. His writing is better than any human being I've ever worked with. He will not say any of that, and I'm making him tremendously uncomfortable by saying any of it myself. But he is the greatest, and as soon as we hang up, I'm going to text him a whole bunch of things about Peep Show. If you all have not watched Peep Show, it's on Hulu, and you really should.
That was great, Tyler. I'll send that check right along and have that bug take the gun off you. Thank you for
Get my
having
vertebrae
me,
shoved back into place. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
And thank you, listeners, for listening.
And that too. Thanks, Josh.
Bye-bye.
Time to welcome in Benjamin Hill for this week's episode of The Show Before the Show. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Tyler, and hello, Sam Dykstra. Sitting to my left as we face out looking at Manhattan along Avenue of the Americas.
Yes.
It's quite a iconic view we got here. I can see a Gap
A store that's called the Gap. There's
Yeah.
also gaps between the buildings.
That's right. I can see multiple gaps, and I can see an American flag that is mostly obscured by a fox flag.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no American Eagle.
Yeah.
We cannot see an American Eagle.
Okay. Well, at least if you rip a seam in a pant leg or something, you know that you got options close by to the new offices. It's very important stuff.
Yes.
We do. We're very close to the Diamond District, too. We can see elements of the Diamond District.
We can do our Uncut Gems cosplay every night on our way home.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing that already.
And some wouldn't
you're
even
not
call it
saying?
cosplay. Some would just call it, me running up and down the street just yelling, "Who wants a bet?"
There you go. That's a good idea. Well, let's get rolling on this week's conversation with Ben. Kind of a sneaky new primary logo has been unveiled by the Winston-Salem Dash. The Dash have come out with a new interlocking WS. This was a very difficult birthed identity back 10, 12 years ago when it was unveiled. Winston-Salem was the Warthogs. They were supposed to move into a new ballpark as the Dash in 2009. There was a nightmare situation trying to get that ballpark open in which construction stopped, and then the city, the newspaper called for a boycott, and they were playing on campus at Wake Forest, and like literally 24 people would show up to the games, and the whole thing was a nightmare. Then they opened the ballpark in 2010. It's an absolute gem. It's gorgeous. But the Winston-Salem Dash identity, which has always been kind of a strange outlier in the MILB world in its conceptual identity. This is the first refreshed look to that logo and that name since it was unveiled about a decade ago, and it kind of came on with very little fanfare. This wasn't really announced. It wasn't a big thing. They haven't rebranded. It's just a new look.
Yeah, and we have a new logo. We've been talking a lot about rebrandings. Obviously for the last couple of months, the off season, a big portion of it is rebranding season. Not too many teams that just kept their name and redid the logos. We had a little bit of that with the Danville Braves, who I don't think we talked about, who did change their primary logo around, but still so much in the sort of MLB parent club Braves logo fashion that I guess it didn't seem very noteworthy in terms of like a real aesthetic shift for the Danville Braves. The other team that has changed its primary logo is more pronounced. Tyler, like you said, it's the Winston-Salem Dash, who did so today, yesterday. If you're listening to the podcast today being the day that the podcast came out, Thursday. Anyway, they did it yesterday, Wednesday. It all makes sense. On Wednesday, the Winston-Salem Dash unveiled a new primary logo. Yeah, a little under the radar, not one that they really hyped up too much. Tyler, you spoke quite a bit. You were, I guess, a Carolina League guy at the time that the Winston-Salem Dash identity came into being. It was
They
difficult.
did not ever appreciate when I called them the Winston-Salem Dash. That was the original concept behind the name. Was there's a dash in between Winston and Salem, and a dash is like a baseball term, like stealing a base and whatever. But that's not a dash; it's a hyphen. So they did not like when I called them the hyphens or the Winston-Salem.
So you're bringing it back just to.
I'm trying to reopen old wounds.
Okay,
That's what we're saying.
Always good.
It's always good. It's the only way to move on. So yes, they are keeping the Dash name, which, as Tyler mentioned, is a grammatical reference among other things. But whereas the Dash, the previous logo, the so-called angry baseball, the team name, Dash was written in this kind of speeding bullet train fashion with an angry baseball attached to it. The previous logo did try to convey a dash, forward movement, velocity, those
Baseball
sort of things.
italics.
Yeah,
basically what it was in.
Yeah, baseball italics, exactly. Good way to put it. So there's still the dash, but now we have a classic kind of retro, old school looking logo, a interlocking WS. Or maybe not even so much interlocking as much as a S placed atop a W, with the lower, 1/6 of the W obscured by the S. These things are always a little hard to explain, but I think, if you think an interlocking WS or an S overlaid atop a W, it's it's a throwback sort of look. Black and white primary colors, and of course keeping purple, which is prominent in the old identity. They unveiled all 3 hats today. Home and Road look almost exactly the same, black with a white Winston-Salem logo on it. The road cap has a purple brim. So still some prominent purple in Winston-Salem land, which is still a fairly anomalous color in the sports branding landscape. But there you have it. The Winston-Salem Dash have a new logo. Oh, and it was done by a local ad agency called The Variable.
And so in your discussions with them, why now? I mean, Tyler opened the segment by saying this is the first time they've done it since they've moved to the new ballpark, and the first time they've gotten a new logo since they left the Warthogs identity behind. But what about now? Is it the new decade? Is it just the old one was feeling stale? Why make this switch?
I think they had felt it was stale for probably a little while. The first year that they had the Dash name was 2009. They moved into the new stadium in 2010. So it's kind of swirling around roughly 10-year anniversaries. Nothing. I think they're going into their technically 12th year as the Dash. So nothing that they can really put a major stamp on it and say this is exactly why. But I think they've been feeling that they just needed a refresh, and heading into a new decade. No time like the present to just get it done. So they've gotten it done, and heading into 2020, new decade, with the new logo.
This might not be something they brought up, but this is more a question for the two of you, Tyler, because you're also a logo fiend. But is there anything to the fact that they move closer to a WS? And I know that's the place name, but they're also a White Sox affiliate. Are they trying to lean into that at all, or is that me looking too much into it?
It does have like a White Sox feel to it, that WS.
It does. And, I wish I had thought to ask that question earlier when I was writing the story, or when I was talking to the team, because that seems pretty obvious. And I even thought of it fleetingly and then forgot.
I mean, it probably isn't, because, this is a Carolina League team. It's North Carolina, outside of Michael Jordan and UNC. Like, there's not really much of a Chicago, North Carolina connection there. It was just something I noticed, so I don't.
No, it's a good question, and I think it bears some investigation. So we'll check in with the team on that. Yeah. Hey, Winston-Salem, is the emphasis on the W? But in talking to CJ Johnson, the team president, I think, I don't want to speak for him. I think the WS for White Sox as well is kind of a nice feature. But I think really what they wanted to do is, Dash doesn't really have a local connection unless you really want to get specific about the hyphen and call it a dash and all that. So I think they really just wanted.
Who would do that?
Yeah, they just wanted an identity that spoke to Winston-Salem, I think, first and foremost. So making the WS very prominent in the new branding, I think, is a way they decided to do that, as opposed to Dash being the most prominent element. They're now minimizing the Dash element of the name. Begs the question, maybe down the line, why not rebrand if you're going to not really have a unique name and not really have anything around it? But, one thing at a time. They're the Winston-Salem Dash, but they're emphasizing the Winston-Salem portion of the name this time around.
I mean, this does feel like a way to kind of have your cake and eat it too, in that so many of the reactions we've seen to rebrandings is, why would you do this? I like the old version. But you can still sell new things out of this and still get that excitement. Is this a middle of the road feature, you feel like?
Yeah, and I think that they didn't want to go in the cartoonish. I don't think they wanted to stir things up. They still have not a Newton ballpark, but a ballpark that draws well. It's still one of the best in the Carolina League. I don't think they felt the need to do something crazy irreverent to get attention at this point in the game. And but why not shake things up? And hey, if you like the old logo, you can still wear your old stuff. It's retro now. And this new logo is kind of retro just in its overall aesthetics. So, take your pick.
The lettering is very actually kind of Red Sox feeling in the style. It reminds me a lot of what Worcester unveiled, the Woo Sox new lettering. Not the W that has the heart in it, but just the standard jersey lettering. But the way that logo is laid out with the W and S going kind of diagonally down left to right, that's very Sox feeling, that Chicago White Sox script. So, kind of interesting stuff for the Winston-Salem Dash. And you can get some of that stuff already on their shop page, which it is Wednesday, and this has not been unveiled, but they've got some of that merchandise up. So a little fun Easter egg for those of you who are now listening on Thursday. They also have a t-shirt of something called the Cheesy Pig Dog, which I'm assuming is a concession stand item that features a pig laying in what looks like a bathtub and pouring like melty cheese on his own belly. And I am 100% buying that t-shirt. So And with that, we'll move on. There is a batting around column, which is coming to the site and has a little bit of a focus on what's going on in Mobile. The Bay Bears obviously moving out. They are the Rocket City Trash Pandas now. And Mobile, that stadium, long used minor league facility. What's going on there?
Yeah, batting around, it's my kind of recurring monthly, more or less, ballpark news column. And, a lot of the time, such as the last column I did, I focused on new ballparks and where they are in their construction. But then when you're thinking about new ballparks, then the other question is, well, what ballparks did they replace? And then when you think about those old ballparks, you're saying, well, what's happening to them now? And so, the Rocket City Trash Pandas are the former Mobile Bay Bears. Mobile no longer has a minor league team. They played in Hank Aaron Stadium, and some pretty interesting stuff going on there. They had a lease. They had 2 years remaining, and so it's a city-owned facility. There are 2 years remaining on the lease that Rocket City's management, had that they obviously no longer need because they're in Rocket City now and no longer the Mobile Bay Bears. So they solicited different proposals for what to do with Hank Aaron Stadium, and a company is coming in and doing more youth tournaments, local tournaments, national tournaments. They're going to have the Babe Ruth World Series at Hank Aaron Stadium next year, so keeping it alive in that way, doing concerts, having holiday light shows, that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk about kind of that progress or that process of once a team moves out, how do you keep a facility viable? What they're doing in Mobile, is one case, and then updating on some other situations, some new ballpark construction, odds and sods, loose ends, ephemera, anything I can find related to that topic: ballpark construction, renovation, and reuse.
I like that Babe Ruth idea. Imagine playing on a Babe Ruth team and getting to play in Hank Aaron Stadium. Like that, as a kid, I mean, the facilities there weren't great and whatever, and there's a reason why they're moving out. But as a kid, that must be awesome. I mean, that's a great way to keep that place alive, I think. Yeah,
you're still playing at a stadium called Hank Aaron, named for Hank Aaron.
Where Double-A ball was played.
Double-A ball was played. I think it's while it may have been in the lower tier of Southern League Double-A ballparks, it's still in the very much upper tier of just places to play baseball overall. It's easy to overlook that sometimes. And, it's called Hank Aaron Stadium. My very first road trip ever was going, as a full-time employee of writing for MILB, was going to Hank Aaron Stadium for the opening of the Hank Aaron Childhood Home and Museum, in which the team played a big role in relocating Hank Aaron's childhood home in Mobile to the grounds of the stadium, furnished it with like period appropriate furniture and artifacts from Hank Aaron's career. And so apparently the Hall of Fame has taken a lot of the things that were in that museum, and childhood home and museum, once the Bay Bears left town. But the Hank Aaron's childhood home is still on the premises. And so it'll be interesting to see, what the city, what the new operators of the ballpark, are able to do with that very unique element of the ballpark.
Benjamin Hill is on Twitter at Ben's Biz, on Instagram at TheBen'sBiz, and you can find all of his stuff, of course, at MILB.com, including the batting around story and the Winston-Salem new look and all of that and more. And Ben, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you guys. And last week, we talked about office GIFs and how I said minor league teams should not use them anymore.
Right.
In replying to tweets, I expressed that sentiment yesterday. And just go to my Twitter at Ben's Biz if you want to see minor league teams responding to my suggestion that office GIFs should no longer be used. It is a very robust reply thread, to say the least. So check that out if you're into that kind of thing. A lot of people said it brought them a smile, a little bit of joy, and that's all I'm trying to provide, even though I cannot speak. Goodbye, guys.
We're here. Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
This has been a fun one today. A wall-to-wall MILB.com journey through the site and what is up on the site, what is coming to the site, all that kind of stuff. This is a fun one, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, we joked about it at the start of the show about how this has been a busy week for baseball, and obviously it has. But it's just a reminder of any given week, we're always going to have stuff up on the site that's new and different and something you might not have thought about. I love Josh's story. I really like that we have Kelsie's story up, and then we could bring them on this week. And then, Ben, talking to him, he always says like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. And then a team rebrands itself in the middle of January. So, if spread the word on this is what I'm saying, is that if you think
spread the word.
Yeah, if you think the podcast is going away in the middle of January, it's not. If you think minor league news is going away in the middle of January, it's not. This wheel keeps on turning.
And you can get in touch with the show again, podcast at MILB.com. Sam's on Twitter at Sam Dykstra MILB. I am at Tyler Ron. We're talking about logos and hats and all that kind of stuff. And just a reminder, over 90 teams will vie for the Copa de la Diversión in 2020, each with an identity as unique and impactful as its area's Hispanic community. Follow minor league baseball on social at MILB and visit the Copa website at MILB.com/fans/Copa to find out more about the initiative's newest members and colorful, vibrant identities. Go check out Sam's stuff and Ben's stuff and Josh's stuff and Kelsey's stuff on the site at MILB.com. I've got a story that kind of ties in with Kelsey's story. Some alternate marks that are coming out for teams in 2020. That'll be coming up to the site, I believe, next week. We're going to roll that one out. And we'll have some more fun as we get closer to the end of January and pitchers and catchers reporting in just about a month. So that'll do it for Sam Dykstra. I'm Tyler Mon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this week. We'll talk to you next week.